Hello and welcome to the Week 2 Megapod here on thelines.com. Matt Brown, Adam Candy, Steven Andrews. We're going to break down each and every game on the slate. Listen, if we don't have any thoughts on the game, we'll move right along. We're not going to waste your time here, but certainly some interesting games and certainly some bets in the account here on the show. If you want to follow Adam over on the Twitter machine at Adam Candy, 2 E's, no Y. Steven is at Steven Andrews 1. You want to follow me at Matt Brown M2. Of course, everything we do absolutely free. So go into all the Lines accounts and subscribe, rate, review, do all the different things on YouTube, whether you listen to us on the audio side or the video side. We do appreciate your support over there. Let us know in the comments if you're watching us on video, what games did we get wrong? What bets should we have made, or what bets that are in our account are absolutely hideous? We like to hear that as well. But let's kick things off here, boys, with the first game of the week. And this one maybe is one of those hold your nose plays. It's the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback and Joe Flacco at quarterback. And we're sitting right now 6.5, 39 is the low in the market out there as far as total. Most every other book is sitting at 39.5. So yes, we have a sub 40 total here in week 1. Steven, I'm going to start with you because we were talking a little bit before the hit the record button here, and you actually have a play in this one.
Yeah, hold your nose special, and I'm not alone at thelines.com. If you go to our Gridiron Gamble podcast, if you go to Mo Nawara's write-ups, if you go to Eli Hershkovich's write-ups, this is a popular side this week, and it's the, God help us, the JETS at plus 6.5 here. So if you look at the way the Browns-Panthers spread closed last week, Panthers closes a 1.5 point favorite. So basically a pick 'em on a neutral field with this version of the Browns. So now the Browns are a 6.5 point home favorite against the Jets. Are we to believe that the Panthers would be a 6 point home favorite against the Jets too? Like I patently reject that. And just overall, with the way the Browns want to play offense under Jacoby Brissett, I am never laying 6.5 points with this team. So I am taking a leap of faith. Joe Flacco is the quarterback. I don't love that, obviously, but the Browns offense to me was highly questionable to cover this spread, and I thought was pretty lucky to win the game last week, needing a 58-yard field goal. The Browns lost yards per play 5.2 to 4.8. They allowed more than 7 yards per play in the second half to the Carolina Panthers. Brissett, less than 5 yards per attempt passing. Conklin on the offensive line, still limited. And the Jets were pretty stout against the run, believe it or not, against the Ravens last week, allowing 3 yards per carry on the ground to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. So, give me the points here.
I'm going to go over to you here, Adam. There's no way I could back this Jets team. I mean, anytime you have to have Joe Flacco throw 59 times in a game, that's bad and you're not good. And I understand the whole yards per carry. One of the things you'll learn about Steven as we watch it over the course of the season, Steven likes to take spreads from the week before and try to make them comparatively to the week after, which has no correlation whatsoever, but Steven loves to do this. And so I don't care what the spread was last week in a game in week 1 that we knew nothing about any of these teams. And the books have made adjustments. Like this is complete nonsense.
Clearly they haven't. They're making the Browns a 6.5 point favorite against the team with Jacoby Brissett, the quarterback.
Well, right, but that's an testament to, I think, where the Jets stand in the grand scheme of things as opposed to anything else. But Adam, I'll go to you on this. I mean, listen. I understand what's going to happen here. It's going to be a gross, disgusting game. We're sitting literally one book out there at 39 right now on this total. But the Browns are just going to run the ball 40 times in this game. The Jets are not going to be able to stop them every time that they run the ball. It's just not going to happen. And I don't know where the points are going to come from on the Jets side as well. Flacco looked completely washed. It's not like we didn't know he was completely washed, but he looked completely washed last week as well. That offensive line has some real issues, and I am wondering how in the hell they're going to stack up against this Browns pass rush. I think Flacco is going to be under duress all game long. I'm not betting it, but there's no way in hell you could catch me with a Jets bet in my account.
I like it when I get to find out all the interesting little dynamics of the podcast here as the new guy. And this guy likes doing it this way. This guy says there's no correlation. I'll say this about my feelings on the Jets and the Browns. The only thing I have an interest in, and I haven't played it yet, I'm still considering this as a first half under. If Joe Flacco is going to be potentially firing the ball in the air 50 odd times, look, no matter how many passes a bad quarterback throws, eventually a cornerback might fall down. Someone might blow an assignment. You could end up seeing some late kind of points to get over that 39. It's 19 and a half in the first half. I don't know if the Jets will get a touchdown in the first half, right? I don't know that if they try to script anything, it's going to go anywhere. And as you said, Matt, Cleveland just wants to run the ball. And I think what they saw last week is only going to enforce the fact that they want to run the ball and run the ball exclusively. So if we can get the clock moving in this thing and get it going quickly in the first half, that's the way I would look at it. Other than that, I don't have any interest.
Last one I'll just bring up here, Stephen. 36 and a half rush yards for Kareem Hunt. Like, I understand he's definitely operating as the number 2 behind Nick Chubb there. But again, if I think that there's going to be 40 rush attempts in this game, which I probably think there are, and 25 of them go to Chubb and 15 of them go to Hunt, I mean, he's going to get that fairly easily. Now, I could be wrong on the projections, and maybe they throw the ball. Who knows? Maybe they come out slinging. I mean, it's week 2. We have no idea what the tendencies are of these teams, but it seems like the path of least resistance is use that offensive line, use your 2 weapons at running back. And if that's the case, I mean, Kareem Hunt is going to get to 37 rush yards in this game.
While we're talking about things we've learned on this podcast, what I've learned over the past year is that Matt is much better at props than I am. I suck at props, and I will only be giving my last prop for the entire season on this podcast. I'm not doing it for the rest of the year. After a swift kick in the nuts week 1, that I still suck at props. So, but you know what? Is the Ravens offense better than this version of the Cleveland Browns offense? I think we'd all mostly agree yes there. And the Jets defense did hold the Ravens to 5.2 yards per play last week, a below average mark if you look at last season's yards per play averages. Eli notes in his best bets column that the Browns defense had the 10th highest EPA per carry in week 1, which was similar to its defensive output last year. So despite the talent, they're not putting up elite numbers on defense. So I don't think the Jets want Joe Flacco to throw it 50 plus times in a game. I think they were down 14 points halfway through the third quarter, and they just started airing it out. So I just think with the way these two teams want to play offense, we're in for a rock fight here, and it's a pretty good chance we stay within 1 possession.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Even at 39, if I had to play the total, I'd play the under as well. Like, this has like 17-10 or 17-14 like written all over it in my opinion. Just a disgusting, gross game. Bucks and the Saints. Now, this one, you want to talk about a disgusting, gross game. It's because we have no idea who's going to be out on the field for either one of these teams. This injury report for both of these guys is absolutely atrocious. As we sit right now, the Bucks are 2.5-point road favorites over the Saints. 44.5 is your total. Adam, I'll go to you here. Look, I have the Saints in a teaser leg that I made earlier in the week because I thought, hey, this is going to be an absolutely awesome play. We knew at the very least that Chris Godwin was very unlikely to go for the Bucks. Now, he is not going to go this week, but now they've got about 10 other guys on the injury report. Now the Saints have about 10 other guys on the injury report. And so I don't love the teaser leg. I don't hate it at this point. I'm fine that it's in my account, but I just assumed I was getting the much healthier team at home and getting to take them up to 8.5 points, in which case I will love that all day long in a game of the 44 total. And then it comes out that Alvin Kamara might not go, and now the offensive lineman's questionable, and this guy's questionable. So I don't know. It's tough on a Friday morning where we don't have the official injury reports to really give the full thoughts here. But what do you look at here with the Bucks and Saints?
Yeah, I'm with you, Matt, that I think the 8.5 teaser leg is very attractive on New Orleans. And I still actually think it, even despite the injury situation on the New Orleans side, because I think this is way more about Tampa Bay than it is about New Orleans. We kind of know what the Jameis Winston Saints will be, right? I think what you saw in the fourth quarter in Atlanta last week is more representative than what you saw in the first 3 quarters. And it goes back to what we've discussed, which is that with so few preseason snaps for first string offensive players together, you kind of saw last week as a feeling out process, right? We heard a lot about sharp guys playing unders last week, and a lot of that ended up playing out. So I'm not worried about the team that couldn't get moving against the Falcons early on. What I am worried about on the Bucs side is who's going to be around to catch passes. What I am worried about on the Bucs side as well is against a Dallas defense that was sort of Micah Parsons and nothing else, they couldn't finish drives. And so ultimately, you end up with 19 points in a game against the Cowboys in which the Cowboys couldn't sustain anything offensively. I think you have legitimate questions about what Tampa Bay's offense is going to be able to do against the Saints defense that we know is one of the best in the NFL. So don't listen to the noise that you're going to hear this week about the Saints own the Bucs and what it's been in the regular season, this and that, right? Like, it's different bodies in different uniforms. That's not the kind of noise that you want in your head. I think what you do want is that if the total is as low as it is, the teaser leg's out to 8.5. I think that's your play.
Steven, we take a look, and the reason Adam mentions like who's going to catch the ball, and again, this is maybe the most important injury report of the week for any of the games, because this is all from Thursday. Russell Gage, who was unable to play last week due to injury, was limited. Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, all DNPs on Thursday for this Bucs squad. So it is very tough. Tackle Tristan Wirfs, limited participant as well. We already know the offensive line was banged up. Donovan Smith, another tackle, was a DNP for them. Leonard Fournette, out of nowhere, was a limited participant in practice. And so it is just one of those deals where this is the walking wounded already here in week 2 for this Bucs team, that even if some of these guys do play, we know that the injuries were bad enough for them to be DNPs on Thursday. So how effective will they actually be? And what is the level of re-injury concern we have with those guys? So it's tough for me to find a solid reason to back Tampa, knowing what we know heading into the game.
For sure. At the start of the week, this was a smash spot for me on New Orleans, but then Alvin Kamara pops up on the injury report. He's dealing with bruised ribs. It's great having an injury.
Cam Jordan was limited, who obviously on that defensive line we think is a big mismatch for them. I mean, like it's not only Kamara, right? It's Jameis even was a limited participant. We know he's going to play, but he's dealing with some sort of something. So it's just both of these key players on both teams.
For sure. I think, though, at this juncture, as we record on Friday morning, I am more concerned about the Bucs injury situation, in particular, the tackles being not at 100%, because we already felt that the interior offensive line was taking a step back with some replacements and backups coming into the season. Now you have the tackles that are not at 100%. Against a Saints defensive front that, yes, they got run on a little bit with a mobile quarterback last week, but now they face a 45-year-old statue back there who, and if they want to run the ball, which Todd Bowles has emphasized, the Bucs shifted from the number 1 team last year in pass rate to bottom 6 in week 1. And that I don't think was necessarily totally because of the game script. I think Todd Bowles has talked about wanting to be more balanced. And the Saints were the number 1 rush D last year in terms of both rush EPA and success rate. So I think there's a lot of reasons to like the matchup here for the Saints. I think that we've seen it in past regular season matchups between these teams. Marcus Lattimore has been up and down in his career, but he's always been very good covering Mike Evans. I still am very comfortable with the Saints as a plus 8.5 teaser leg here, mostly because Jameis Winston impressed me week 1. He was top 3 in completion percentage over expectation, putting the ball on point in some tight windows. And we've talked about coming into the season that we felt like these two teams were a little mispriced in the market, maybe too much credit for the Bucs, not enough credit for the Saints. I think this is a good spot to take advantage of that in a teaser leg.
Adam, real quick, 44.5 on this total. We got a mash unit on the offensive line for the Bucs. I mean, the only guy that graded out well last week, Tristan Wirfs, is the guy who's on the injury report for them. Everybody else was complete garbage. You saw Brady having to do the self-sacks. He was having to get rid of the ball at the fastest rate that he's had to in a couple of seasons as well, just to be able to get the ball out. And then if we are dealing with the Kamara injury, maybe there's something kind of nagging Jameis as well. This is not going to be the under show or anything like that. But again, I 44.5 to me, we know 44 from a total perspective is at least a semi-key number. The under for me seems like the play in this one as well, because I don't know how effective either one of these offenses is really going to be.
Yeah, the only thing I would keep in mind if you're going to play the under is that I think the market has already priced it to some degree when you look at what the total in a Bucs game would normally be, especially a Bucs game inside without weather concerns for Tom Brady. I'm with you, though. I would not be drawn in by seeing 44 and say, 44 with their ability to throw the ball, I'm playing that over.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, this is not last year's Bucs team. This is Bruce Arians is not in charge of this team anymore. I don't think they're going to be at the top of the league in pass rate anymore.
Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. New York Giants coming off their first win of the season, going for 2. I feel maybe a little too early, and maybe with the team having timeouts and things like that, that the decision is questionable at best. But hey, they got the job done. That helps me towards my alt over that I have on the New York Football Giants this season. They find themselves as 1.5 to 2 point home favorites here over the Carolina Panthers, a total of 43 to 43.5. Carolina Panthers lose on a last second 58-yard field goal by the Cleveland Browns, and that's how they start the season 0-1. Stephen, if we take a look at this one, I mean, listen, it is a potential teaser situation if you wanted to go with the Panthers. I am going to not, because I am, again, a little bit higher on the Giants than most people are this season. I feel like the Giants are at least a semi-good team, where I do not feel that way about the Carolina Panthers. So it's a pass for me on this one, kind of all around. If anything, I would play the Giants as short favorites. And I know that's crazy to say that we enter this week where I'm sitting here saying I'd play the Giants as short favorites, but that's kind of where I sit with all of this. I do believe Daniel Jones will figure out who the number 1 wide receiver is there at some point, and I think this offense has a little bit of upside. So for me, it's a pass, but it'd be Giants or nothing.
I did play the Panthers as a teaser leg up to +8. I feel like I wonder, Matt, if the Panthers are a 2-point dog, if York misses a 58-yard field goal and the Giants don't convert on a 2-point conversion, and or the Titans make that field goal at the end of the game and the Giants lose. So I think the Giants are getting an extra point here, maybe with a little bit of credit for a couple of games that were coin tosses in week 1. So happy to get the Panthers up through the 7 as well on the teaser leg here as a short underdog. I mentioned it again, I think they started clicking a little bit in the second half against an above average Cleveland defense, 7 yards per play in the second half. Both offensive lines should give their quarterbacks time in this game. The New York Giants defensive line was 27th in pass rush win rate in week 1 against an injured and at least on paper, an offensive line for Tennessee that wasn't supposed to be as good as last year. And as of right now, Thibodeau and Ojulari, most importantly for the Giants, are still limited participants in practice this week. I would love this teaser leg if I knew both of them are out and not playing in this week. I like it a little less if they are playing. So that's kind of where I'm at on this one. I'm curious if anybody here likes the over. From Jeffrey Schreiber, one of our new writers at the Lines, he noted that the Carolina Panthers went from the 7th fewest snaps in 2020 to top 15 last year, and now they had Ben McAdoo, who was first, second, and second in his time in New York in no huddle rate. So I'm curious if this is a sneaky little over here with a low total at 43.5.
Adam, you are our resident New York Giants football fan here. Congrats on the week 1 win. I honestly think that they played pretty well, and I thought Daboll, again, while I thought it was a little too early and considering the other team had a timeout as well, like I like to go for 2 in those situations where you're going for the win, and there was still enough time, and with the other team having a timeout, that it wasn't necessarily for the win. It was just to kind of go ahead, and then you obviously encourage them to play super aggressive then at that point. So I don't know, it can be counterintuitive sometimes, but a win is a win is a win. So they are 1-0 and they find themselves as short favorites here in week 2.
A win is a win. And as much as you and I, Matt, are devotees of analytical numbers and the probabilities didn't necessarily back Brian Daboll, here's why I like that choice. And here's what I think it says about playing this game this week. I love that Brian Daboll went to his defense and said to his defense, hey guys, what do you think? We going for this? And the defense said to him, yeah, we're going for this. And you know what? They held it to the point where Randy Bullock had to make a long field goal. Randy Bullock didn't make a long field goal. And what do I like about that? I like the fact that Brian Daboll has shown that he's going to be aggressive, right? Not necessarily he's going to read the chart every time, but he's going to be aggressive. And I think that's going to give the Giants more opportunities to win ball games in the long run. Now, this particular game this week with the Giants laying less than a field goal at home, I'm going to pass on this game entirely for a couple of reasons. First of all, I hear the point that Steven's making about would this spread look like it does if the Giants ultimately lose that game? I think it would, and only for this reason. Baker Mayfield and Carolina were close last week, but they were close in a weird way because they were close with Baker Mayfield fumbling the ball 4 times and somehow getting all 4 back. They were also close, somehow only getting Christian McCaffrey 10 rushes, 5 targets, and 4 catches. What I'm saying here is I don't trust Matt Rule. And I don't trust what's going on in Carolina. And so I think the teaser leg looks pretty obvious in terms of getting those points. The reason I don't love the over is because I watched Daniel Jones last week. And Daniel Jones threw one of the worst interceptions you will ever see. Also was sacked 5 times.
Adam, that was his only turnover-worthy play, though.
It was worthy of 2 turnovers.
If we're looking at the upside here, I mean, like as a guy who's followed Daniel Jones here for last week, if he only has 1 turnover worthy play in a game, that's got to be looking in the right direction. It is running in the right direction, I think. And speaking of running in the right direction, see what I did there? Saquon Barkley looked back last week. Goes for 164 yards. And even if you take the long run out of it, he basically went 17 for 100, which is still pretty good for Saquon Barkley. And I think Brian Daboll, even though he comes from the Buffalo offense of wanting to throw the ball more often, I think he also is going to be realistic about who Daniel Jones is and what their chances of winning are. And their chances of winning is looking at Carolina from last week, seeing the fact that they couldn't stop Cleveland on the ground as they went for more than 200 yards and keeping the ball on the ground. So I think the Giants are going to want to run this ball in this game. That's what would get me off playing the total in terms of looking at that low total and saying over.
Matt, that's what I was very curious about coming into the season, right? Because we talked about how pass-heavy Daboll was in Buffalo, but would he try and force that onto a roster that doesn't really fit that and a quarterback? We saw the opposite, right, in week 1. This is a coach that has shown us evidence to tailor his offense around what personnel he has. 32 rush attempts in week 1 to only 21 pass attempts. I agree with Adam. That shows very positive signs for me. Another check in the right column for Brian Daboll.
New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are sitting as 2 to 2.5 point home underdogs here to this New England Patriots team that looked god awful in week 1 against the Miami Dolphins. 40.5 is the total pretty much across the board. There's 140 out there if you are looking to play an over. Majority of the books are sitting at 40.5. If we take a look at this one, Adam, I'm not trying to say this is like the under week for me or something, but again, even with the extremely low total of 40.5, I mean, I look at both of these teams. I think the Patriots offense, and by no doing, I don't think of Bill Belichick or anything like that. I think the Patriots offense has bottom 5 to bottom 7 teams in the entire NFL potential this season. If you watched last week, and I'm sure you did, there's just no dudes on that team. Like there's no playmakers whatsoever. Like there's nobody when the going gets tough that you go, you know, if you were Philadelphia, you would turn and be like, oh, here's where AJ Brown gets involved. Or if you're in Cincinnati, it's like, here's where Jamar Chase is going to go crazy, and et cetera, et cetera. Like they don't have no dudes there. Like there's nobody that you look at and think like, man, this is the guy that can really turn it around for this team. So I don't know. This feels like a wrong team favored situation. To me, I understand that TJ Watt is going to be out. I do get that, but I don't think that it really matters all that much with how really putrid this Patriots offense looked last week and could be again this week. So this did make the card as a teaser leg for me. Steelers up to 8. And I feel really, really good about this one. I can't imagine this Patriots team, even if they win this game, I can't imagine the Patriots blowing anybody out. Like I just don't see it unless their opponent just has a million turnovers, which I guess could potentially happen here with Mitch Trubisky, but I think it's highly unlikely.
I like the way you're thinking about this, Matt, that even if New England wins, the idea of this New England team being able to win by that amount of points in a game that doesn't feature a lot of turnovers, and I don't think this game's going to feature a lot of turnovers because both teams want to pound the ball relentlessly. They know who they have at quarterback. You know, on one hand, I can look at New England from last week and say, all right, well, they score 7 points, but Mac Jones got them down close on the first drive through an interception in the end zone, right? And I could say, oh, well, they probably should have gotten points out of that drive. I also could look at it the other way and say, those opportunities are absolute gold for New England. And if New England doesn't take advantage of them when they have them, they're going to put up 7 points a lot. And I think you look at this game in particular and say, all right, I have these two teams power rated right next to each other, right? And so if I can get 8 points with two teams that I see as completely equal, then I think I'm going with the 8 points. So I have not played that. I like your play. Yes, again, 40.5. I think the only way to play is under, even though 41's a little on the key side. But I don't want to get involved with that either.
Steven, it looks like everything's fine with Najee Harris. He was a full participant at practice on Thursday, so nothing we have to worry about there. It did look like it could be pretty bad for him, but if he's going to be out there and they're going to be able to run the ball and kind of, make this clock just continually run the whole time and whatever. And I mean, there's still some, obviously a ton of talent at the wide receiver position for the Steelers. It's just, can Mitch Trubisky actually get them the ball? That's kind of the big question, which he was not able to really do in week one all that effectively. But I just see two really bad offenses going at a game here where if I can get 8 points with either one, if this was flip-flopped, I'd take it with the Patriots. So I just don't think either one of these teams is built to blow anybody out. And so that's kind of how I look at this one.
You guys have said enough about the Patriots offense being pretty suspect. Let me just echo how suspect the Steelers offense is too, because they were, again, putrid to start the year last week. 4.4 yards per play, Trubisky negative completion percentage over expectation, offensive line below average pass block and run block win rate. Luckiest winner by far in week one. I mean, they should have lost that game 18 different ways if the Bengals had a long snapper. And if you play it over again, I mean, they might lose that game by 3 touchdowns a lot of the time. So 0 red zone trips in the second half for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Only offensive scores in the first half came off turnovers that started inside the opponent's 45-yard line. So they went in by 3 in OT, which included a pick 6 earlier in the game. I mean, how lucky can you get to win that game? All that being said, this number's moved now steadily to Steelers +2. There's a +2.5 on the board now. I don't think we're going to get there, but if we somehow get a Steelers +3 with everything you talked about the concerns with the Patriots offense, an offense that's spending like $28 million in cap hits between Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, and Nelson freaking Aguilar. Like this, to your point, they have no playmakers. So if we get a 3-point home dog here somehow, again, not sure we're going to get it, but I think that's the only point where I'd be interested in this game.
Yeah, and
on the Steelers.
And I would certainly come in. Yeah, if we were to get the full 3, I'd probably come back in just on a straight play on them as well. We'll see if it gets there. Who knows? I mean, the Patriots have been popular over the years, but that was when Captain Tom was back there. So
Mac Jones back spasms too, by the way. We don't know the extent of that because New England's like super secret and won't say anything. So we don't know how bad that back's messed up for Mac Jones either.
Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have a Colts team favored by 3.5 as we sit here and record this, a total of 44.5 to 45. We know how this went. The Colts looked absolutely horrible in week one. Listen, they were able to move the ball pretty good. A lot of that was Jonathan Taylor just being Jonathan Taylor, but we are, finding a team that could not figure out how to beat the Texans. Now, they had a 42-yard field goal. In order to be able to do just that, Rodrigo Blankenship shanked the 42-yard field goal. He finds himself unemployed come Monday morning because they're like, hey, if you can't make a 42-yarder to win the game for us, then you're not going to kick for us anymore. So he's no longer on the team. The Jags were feisty against the Commanders. That being said, at the end of the day, we're unable to get it done. Carson Wentz actually was able to make some plays in that game and got it done. So, Adam, what do we see here are you looking at this as an obvious bounce back spot for the Colts? Or are you looking at this as hey, maybe we were overvaluing this Colts team a tad and this Jaguars team, despite the loss, did look pretty good at times?
What I'm looking at is this is a pass for me entirely because these are two teams that I don't feel like I know a whole lot about coming out of week one. I would especially keep an eye on the injury report in this game. The Colts beat guys are saying that Buckner's limited, Pittman's limited. We're not sure who's practicing and who's going to be available. And so something's weird to me in a game where we look at Matt Ryan and that offense going for 500 plus yards. and only able to put up 3 points in the first 3 quarters. Like, something's not right with what's going on in Indianapolis right now. On the other side with Jacksonville, I watched a lot of Trevor Lawrence because I told you last week, I think it's one of the biggest questions in the NFL this year. Who's Trevor Lawrence going to be? And man, is that a mixed bag right now. And it's not just a matter of the offensive line, but if you just watch throw for throw with Trevor Lawrence right now, there are accuracy issues for him that might take a little while to work out. So if you forced me onto a side, you would force me onto Jacksonville with the points, but I'll pass on this game entirely.
Stephen, Adam brought up the big point here, which actually did put me on the Jags. I have the Jags a +4 ticket in the account. It was shortly thereafter when this went off the 4 to 3.5. And that was the fact that there were 2 downgrades at practice for the Colts this week. DeForest Buckner went from limited to DNP. Michael Pittman went from limited to DNP on Thursday. You're looking now also at Alec Pierce, their rookie receiver, who was limited in participation. Kenny Moore, their corner, also did not participate in practice on Thursday. Now, we know that can all change on a Friday, but typically when you get downgraded through the course of the week, it doesn't tend to get better as we further. So I got in on the Jags at 4. I think without Pittman out there, without Buckner, I don't know if there's a huge difference. Now, the Colts are better for sure, but if I'm catching 4 points at home with a Jags team where I agree with Adam, there were some moments where I'm still going like, come on, Trevor, man, what are you doing? But I also saw some moments where I'm like, that's what they were talking about with this kid. Like, that's what's going on here. And you could see, obviously, the coaching change already a big thing for this Jags team, already much better. I really do like them at home here. I can be proven to be completely silly and the Colts just completely boat race them, but that's not how I feel this is going to go.
With this injury report, I don't think the Colts are going to boat race them. I mean, on paper, if fully healthy, we can have that conversation, but I don't think we should undersell how significant some of these injuries are for the Colts, with DeForest Buckner being their main pass rusher. Michael Pittman is going to be at least compromised, it seems, in this game. He's not at 100%, going from a limited to a DNP in the middle of the week. So who's Matt Ryan throwing to if Michael Pittman isn't out there? His next best receiver was their backup running back, Nyheim Hines, in week 1. That's a major issue for this offense, that they don't have a secondary threat on the outside. And for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I was very encouraged. Yes, I agree that I watched the throws too. He missed Travis Etienne on a wide open wheel route for a touchdown, and then Etienne returned the favor, dropping a walk-in touchdown on a screen pass by the goal line. So, yes, there were miscues for this Jacksonville offense. Despite that, they still finished top 10 in the league in week 1 in yards per play, 6.2 to 5.6 for Washington. So I thought they were extremely unlucky to lose that game, let alone fail to cover. And these are situations where I want to come back in and bet them again, especially as a home underdog at more than a field goal. So, and especially when your opponent has injury concerns at very key positions for them. And the last thing I'll mention too is that, we all assumed coming into the season that the Indianapolis Colts had an elite offensive line, but in week 1, red flag for me, 24th in pass block win rate against the Houston Texans front 7 that was supposed to be bottom of the barrel. And now they play a Jacksonville front 7 that does have some young, talented pass rushers. They were 8th in pass rush win rate against what most people would agree is an above average Washington offensive line. So I think a lot of reasons to like this spot for Jacksonville. And even if I didn't already bet it at 4, I would still bet them at plus 3.5.
And I like the utilization of those receivers. Again, like we don't, whether we think they got overpaid or not, that's irrelevant, right? I mean, that's not, it doesn't matter how we handicap games, but I liked the way that they were looking at these receivers, right? And the way that they were using Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and things like that. Like, I think that there are some real positives here for this.
Yeah, they don't have a number 1, but they have some solid number 2s and number 3s. And yet, listen, the Jags secondary stinks, but this is not Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson that they're going up against this week, especially if Pittman's banged up.
Let's take a look here at the Miami Dolphins and the Baltimore Ravens. As we sit right now, the Baltimore Ravens are 3.5-point home favorites over the Dolphins. 44.5 is your total. Steven, I'll start with you because you and I have the same thought here on this one. Taking the points with the Dolphins.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a spot where, some people might argue with us, Matt, that this is an overreaction for the Dolphins after 1 week against the Patriots. But we all said last week, we shouted from the rooftops that we would never lay 3.5 points or more with Tua as the quarterback. But this is not that situation. This is more than a field goal as an underdog. So I got it at 4. I'd be fine with it at 3.5. I thought the Dolphins defense looked very strong week 1, number 1 in run stop win rate against what was projected to be a top 10 offensive line in New England. So they have the talent to stop this Baltimore run game, a team that wants to be one of the most run heavy teams in the league. And Baltimore only 3 yards per carry week 1 against the Jets. What was interesting to me, and you could say game script, but it wasn't totally out of hand in the first half. Lamar only had 6 rush attempts, which was fewest since October 2020. So maybe a little narrative here that could be false, I fully admit, but he doesn't have that contract yet. Only ran it 6 times week 1. I think it's at least something to look for in future weeks here. And the Dolphins defense last year against the Ravens held them to 4.3 yards per play. Lamar only 4.5 yards per attempt passing the ball, and only had 39 yards rushing on 9 carries in this matchup between these two teams. And lastly, going into this matchup, both tackles are injured for the Ravens. Jawan James on IR, Ronnie Stanley, limited participant to start the week. We'll see how effective he can be. With Mike McDaniel running the script, maybe turning Tua into a Jimmy G clone because he had a high yards per attempt in week 1, although he didn't have a high EPA because they're just being safe and using some yak stuff with speed receivers. I think combine that with a strong defensive matchup for the Dolphins, and I'm happy to take the points here.
So, Adam, actually, even a worse situation for the Ravens than that. Stanley actually gets downgraded to DNP on Thursday. So, anytime you're, again, downgrade throughout the week, not good. So, it looks like they're going to be down both starting tackles. Then you look at the corner position where Kyle Fuller has to go on IR. Now you look, Marlon Humphrey pops up out of nowhere, and he's a limited participant as well. And then you look, Calais Campbell was a DNP on the defensive line as well for this squad. And again, I don't want to sit here and keep pointing, Brandon Stevens, one of their backup corners, DNP. So if these guys can't play, even their backups are hurt. And I think in a situation like that, you can sit here and say, Tua doesn't throw the ball down the field. He doesn't, there's no ADOT there, whatever, all the stuff with that. And who cares, right? If there's no corners out there to cover, if you're literally going to be running out rookies or guys that you're pulling off of the practice squad, it is not going to matter. And good luck, by the way. I don't care if it is a 6 or 7 yard pass. If you get the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands 6 or 7 yards down the field, good luck trying to stop him with whoever in the hell they're going to be putting on the field out there to try to do this. Listen, I like the Ravens as an organization. I like the Ravens as a team. It's just, look, it's the 3rd year in a row. We're here in week 2, and they are already dealing with massive, massive injury concerns that definitely affect how you look at handicapping a game. Do I love the Dolphins? I don't. Do I love kind of this matchup with what I see on paper? I absolutely do. I do. I love what we're getting in this one. And so I love the Dolphins at more than a field goal here.
Yeah, I'm going to go back at a couple of points that I've heard so far. One, the idea of Lamar in the contract and whether or not he runs, I don't buy that at all. That's never been a question for Lamar Jackson in terms of what he's able to do and what he's willing to do. And I mostly look at last week and say, they looked at what they had on the offensive line and thought to themselves the best chance they had to win that game was to have a chance to expose the Jets deep, which is what they did, right? That's ultimately what they chose to do. Was they chose to go after him with the deep pass, and that's where Lamar Jackson, the one place that we've heard Lamar has to improve, was actually pretty good for the Ravens last week. Now, on the Dolphins side of things, I hear the feelings you guys have for Miami. I'm not there. The way New England played last week, Miami should have run them off the field, and they didn't. And they really were fairly close to that being a touchdown game with the way some things broke. Tua's grade last week for PFF was a 53. If they can continue to, give you a San Francisco light offense, and you mentioned the ability to go for yak, and yeah, I mean, anyone coming out of the Shanahan tree in terms of passing is going to be looking to expose the yards after catch. What I worry about here is I don't really see Miami yet at a point where I'm willing to take them going on the road with points. I don't see where, despite the injuries to the Ravens, that the Ravens can't script out a game where they're able to potentially cover these points. Now, I'm not playing it. Let me be really clear about this. I'm just staying off this game entirely. But I'm lower on Miami, I think, than a lot of people are. My numbers suggest that this spread is just about right. So I think you guys are on the right side if there's going to be a side, but I'll pass on it.
Yeah, I just real quick, Steven, just put a bow on this. I mean, like the number one receiver for the Ravens for this whole season is going to be a tight end. It's going to be Mark Andrews. And like now you're going up against this secondary for the Dolphins. It has Javon Holland. They've got, Xavier Howard, who will be able to neutralize whether it's Devin Duvernay or whoever in the hell they decide is their actually number one receiver. And then between Brandon Jones and Javon Holland, they're going to be able to neutralize, Mark Andrews as well. Like this secondary for the Dolphins is legit. Like they're very, very good. And so it's just another one of those things. Like I just don't know. I guess they could go super run heavy, and that could be kind of the strategy here in this one. But I don't know how they move the ball through the air with a ton of success either.
For sure. I think it's a good matchup for Miami. Admittedly, if you're betting Miami at this point, you're getting the worst of the number this week after this opened at 4.5, came back to 4. Now we're at 3.5. But just a greater point, Matt, I think this is a team, Miami, that we all three of us need to consider adjusting our priors on because as we know, there's more money in the NFL market than there is in any other sport. And this is now 2 weeks in a row where big money has come in immediately on Miami and bet them. So this is a team that I need to at least consider my opinion was wrong coming into the season.
Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions as we sit right now, and I'm just going to get this in because it's official until it's not official. The Lions are a favorite for the first time in 24 games, so this might actually go off as a pick 'em. But as of right now, they are 1-point favorites. It's dropped and dropped and dropped. It was 2.5. It was 2. Now it's down to 1.5. Now it's down to 1 at DraftKings, PointsBet, Caesars. All sitting at 1 right now. There are some 1.5 still available out there in the market if you're looking to play a teaser leg with the Commanders. Listen. I can be down on the Commanders, and I can think Carson Wentz is garbage as a player in general, and still acknowledge when the guy has a good game. Yes, there were a couple of bonehead throws. You're going to get that with Carson Wentz. That's just what he is. But overall, pretty good and pretty good game plan, I think. Like everybody was super hyped about Curtis Samuel whenever he went over to the Commanders last year and did absolutely nothing. And then they come out this year and we're thinking, okay, he's an afterthought because they get John Dodson and whatever. And it's like, oh, never mind. It's a Curtis Samuel show all of a sudden for this Commanders team. And so look, if they have those 3 weapons to kind of go to for Carson Wentz between Dodson and Samuel and of course McLaurin, look, that is not a bad trio. It's not the best trio, but it's certainly not a bad trio for him to be going after. And the Detroit Lions, look, this is just what you're going to get in them like every single week, right? Like they're not that team that gets down 17 and then just kind of quits. Like they're going to be annoying as hell to bet against all year long. They might not win a bunch of games, but they're going to make you sweat every single time you bet against them, which is going to suck if you do want to bet against them. Adam, total of 48.5 sitting right now. There was a 47.5 here in Las Vegas in which I played the over in this game. And I'll tell you why. I think we have 2 competent offenses against 2 bad defenses. And anytime you have 2 competent offenses against 2 bad defenses, it typically leads to points. And then let me throw in the absolute bonus of the 2 quarterbacks in the competent offenses being Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, who are good for a pick 6 between one of the 2 of these sons of bitches is going to happen in this game. I promise you. So like, it is like the perfect combination, in my opinion, for an over to happen. Like just enough offense, just enough competency on offense with just enough gunslinger to make some bad stuff happen as well. Like this just had over written all over it to me. And the fact that it was under 49, I think this is a 49, 50, 51 type game all day long. I loved it. Perfect conditions indoors. We don't have to worry about weather playing a factor. We're in the dome. That's my play on this one. I don't have a real thought on the side.
I love where you are with that, Matt. And I can't believe I'm going to use these words about Carson Wentz, but here it is. Better quarterback getting points, right? Mm-hmm. And Carson Wentz is the better quarterback in this game, not by a lot, but he is better than Jared Goff. He has better weapons.
Can we say less bad? I feel more comfortable with less bad.
There we go. The lesser of two evils, Adam. That's what we're going with.
I can't say either guy is one that I'm running to the window to be able to bet week to week. But overall, look, if you trusted my evaluation of Detroit last week, and that game played out literally exactly the way I said it was going to play out last week, where they're going to get behind huge and then they're going to come back roaring into the game the way they did against the Niners the year before. Trust my evaluation this week. This is not a team that should be favored. There's just no way I could see the Detroit Lions as a favorite. So if the 2 is out there anywhere and you want to be able to put Washington in the teaser, if you believe that Detroit can win a game by 8 or more points, God bless and Godspeed, because I do not think that's a possibility for these teams. I do think we need to look at Washington and what you mentioned, Matt, with this offense and say maybe the receivers are actually good enough that they can overcome Carson Wentz, right? That gets you into the less bad territory overall. So, yeah. I like where your head's at in terms of the over. I think I would also feel safe with Washington in the teaser leg past 7.
I agree on the teaser side of things as well. It was a strong consideration for me this week, and I'm not saying it might end up in the account anyway if there are some 1.5s or 2s still available here in Nevada. Because I mean, Steven, when you take a look at it, the thing is the reason that the Lions aren't really built to win by more than 8 points is because even if they build a lead, which, you know, it seems like they're always playing from behind, but even if they build a lead, the defense is so bad that like if Carson Wentz got into a 2-minute offense and he has those 3 receivers and like they have to be super aggressive because they have to move the ball and go score, like they're likely to get some sort of points on the board that would screw that would screw up them covering the teams. Like, so for me, I just don't see them built like that. But also I think the Lions, maybe even the Commanders as well, are teams we need to look at as just kind of air quote over teams moving forward, given that it looks like the offenses are competent and the defenses are going to be like bottom 5 units.
Here's an angle to consider. Washington first quarter. Detroit was at or near the bottom in EPA and success rate first quarter last season. This goes in line with what you guys have talked about, their comeback kings. I know they scored early last week, but let's look at the bigger sample size here. And Washington's offensive coordinator, Scott Turner, top 10 last year in first quarter success rate, despite having Taylor Heineke as his quarterback, adds Dotson, adds Curtis Samuel back into the mix. Logan Thomas is still playing a little bit. Still have Terry McLaurin out there, so very explosive. And if you watch the tape from Washington last week, what I saw was a lot of very impressive designs that was getting Carson Wentz a wide open receiver on his first read. What were our criticisms of Carson Wentz coming in? He can't get off his first read, and when he gets in, and when his first read isn't open, he makes bad mistakes and takes sacks and throws picks. Well, what if his first read is wide open? Because that's a pretty high likelihood. It was in week 1. Detroit's injury report on defense doesn't look great coming into this week. Their number 2 corner, Amani Oruwari, was fine and then downgraded to limited on Thursday with a back injury. Plus, the Lions' offensive line on the flip side looks really banged up right now. Frank Ragnow still has the groin. He now has a foot injury, back-to-back DMPs this week. They already put Vaitai on IR coming into the season, one of their starting guards. Their other guard, Jonah Jackson, downgraded from limited to DMP Wednesday to Thursday. So, yeah, I think wrong team favored here. I bet the Washington win total under coming into the year, but that was with the assumption that they were likely going to beat Jacksonville and Detroit to start the season anyway. So I think my favorite angles here, I haven't bet them yet. I'm still on the fence, but my favorite angles are Washington first quarter and then Washington team total over 23.5 or over 24.
Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. This one shouldn't take long. Sitting right now, 8.5 in favor of the 49ers. 41 is your total. Steven, this is very simple for me. The 49ers were 10-point favorites. It gets announced that George Kittle isn't going to play, which we all knew anyway, and it dropped to 8.5. Like, what are we not paying attention to? George Kittle was never going to play in this game. And like George Kittle gets officially announced out, and then this thing goes down to 8.5. That was already baked into the line. Like we're reacting to news that should have already been known. it became an obvious, like maybe the most obvious teaser leg outside of Cincinnati, which we'll talk about later, of the week. You take the 49ers down to 2.5, and this is just a no-brainer. I don't need to tell you that you throw out what you saw last week in that game. I mean, listen, do we still not really know what we have in Trey Lance? Yes, but it doesn't really matter against this Seahawks team. Look, you can point to them winning last week. The Broncos should have won that game by double digits. They get to the 1, 2 different times and fumble. They get to the 3 and have to settle for a field goal. Like it was just the gods coming down and giving Pete Carroll an absolute gift in that game. But I mean, if you look at their second half drives, no points scored whatsoever for Seattle. It was drives of 17, 37, -6, and then 3 kneel downs. Like that was all they had in the second half. I mean, it was a putrid show. It's a putrid offense. It's a bad team. Don't get fooled by the fact that they were gifted a win in week 1. You take the 49ers down to 2.5. You move on with your day. You play the 49ers in Survivor this week. You move on with your day. The Seattle Seahawks are still one of the 3 worst teams in all the NFL.
Yes, I also have the 49ers -2.5 on a teaser leg. Yeah. I would be lying if I said I was completely comfortable with it because I am not sure how I feel about Trey Lance for week 2 versus my confidence in him long term with Kyle Shanahan being able to craft him. But we're looking at a spread here, guys, that I think the market is telling us that they're not sure that the team that is more than a touchdown favorite has the better quarterback in the game, because I'm not sure Trey Lance is at that point. I went back and watched every pass Trey Lance had in week 1 before the monsoon started. And what I saw was when he has time and he can get planted, he can deliver strikes, including deep balls back across the opposite side of the field, something we never saw the 49ers be able to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. So the tools are there. But when he got a little bit of pressure, then he was off target. When he wasn't planted, he was off target. He threw an easy, wide open throw to a guy off target, stopped the drive. He had a deep ball that he missed because he was on the move and couldn't deliver it on target that would have put the Niners first and goal inside the 10. So he is a work in progress. And with that comes, I think, more conservative Kyle Shanahan that I would like. The 49ers were already 31st in first down pass rate a year ago. In the first half last week, they ran the ball on 11 of 14 first down plays. Now, again, they don't have George Kittle. Now they lose Eli Mitchell, who had 6.8 yards per carry last week. I mean, I don't know how anybody would bet on the 49ers to cover the spread this week. If you're talking spread, it's Seahawks or nothing for me. And I just think that right now, this team is being priced like the quarterback is fine. And I'm not sure we're at that point yet.
Adam, I just don't think we're really going to get much I don't think we're going to learn much either this week out of Trey Lance, because they're not going to need to. I think they run the ball. I'm not even kidding you. Like 65% of the plays this week, the Seattle defensive line is just absolutely atrocious. They're going to be able to run at will on them. So I don't think we learn a lot this week from Trey Lance or anything like that. But look, the Niners are going to win this game. I promise you the Niners are going to win this game. What say you?
Pass is actually what I say. I'm willing to throw last week out, but I'm also realistic that we didn't know anything before last week, right? And that's the real question for me here, is that it's not like we can throw last week out and say, well, Trey Lance, we've seen it before. No, twice in the 49ers' last 45 games, they have scored 10 points or fewer. And both of those games were started by Trey Lance. So I'm not sure that Pete Carroll is the defensive coach that I want to be going against with that situation, because my evaluation of Denver and Seattle last week is Pete Carroll's going to find a way to slop this game up. And I thought Seattle would cover. I didn't think they'd win outright, but I didn't want to lay it with Denver. And so I hear you guys. I think it's a spot where you look at that teaser leg and say, sure, very attractive with San Francisco 2.5. I don't know that I want to get in front of this game at all, though, because I think the variance of what Lance can bring to it is still very high.
Atlanta Falcons on the road at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are 10-point favorites at all shops except for one. There's a 9.5 on the board out there. 46.5 to 47 is your total here. Adam, this one, look, this is the classic, everyone, the classic bounce back spot. The Rams play the best team in the NFL in week one. Everyone thinks the Rams suck, but really it's just you played the best team in the NFL in week one. They come back, they're able to play, the Falcons, who maybe looked a little bit better than they actually should have looked last week, et cetera. So, there's a lot of narratives kind of going in this one. The Rams, I think the Bills defense is awesome. I picked the Bills to win the game. I would nothing that happened in that game shocks me, right? I didn't see anything that blew me away. I still think the Rams are one of the 5 best teams in the NFL, but they just ran into the best team in the NFL. You had a team that played no starters in the preseason. That's just what McVay does. Was there a little bit of rust? I think so. I think Matthew Stafford, if you gave him truth serum, would tell you that there was some rust going on with him, and which is why he didn't look Allen Robinson's way, which is why it was just hike Cooper Kupp, hike Cooper Kupp, hike Cooper Kupp every single time, because that's what he knows and that's what he's familiar with. I imagine there's a little bit more chemistry now, a little bit. They've got a game under their belts. It's all this this is Rams. I think this is Rams big. If I had to lay, which is not in my account, if I had to lay any of the big favorites this week, this would be the one that I would play.
What I have marked in my notes, Matt, is if this manages to get under 10, I think you can feel pretty comfortable with Los Angeles, because this game opened 13, right? It opened 13. What exactly changed for us to get to 10? I understand if it moves a point or two, but this has moved a lot, and we're down to a fairly key number at 10. And so, look, if you want to buy what you saw out of the Falcons last week, again, good luck and have fun with that. But I'm not going to be in that situation. Maybe there's more concern for Matthew Stafford's elbow than others have, than we have. But ultimately, I agree with you. I think this is Rams and Rams big. I know we say classic bounce back spot, and maybe you think about that and say, oh, I don't know, right? You would be a little hesitant. No, I think this really is the place. The Falcons are still horrible, and they couldn't even hold on to the lead they had last week against the New Orleans team that was struggling.
Yeah, Adam, this seems like one-way traffic. Steven, this seems like one-way traffic to me. I don't know. I don't know how you even make a case really here for the Falcons. I think they ran a little bit above expectation last week. And the one thing we do know is if your number one receiver is a tight end and, your other receiver is your best receiver is a rookie, that's just not going to translate to week in, week out, every single week. And then, of course, now you go up against this Rams team, Rams defensive front, secondary, all the different things like that. Seems like one-way traffic to me. And I'm with you, Adam. This thing gets to 9 for whatever reason. I think I'll even come in on the Rams this week.
I'm with you. I'm with you guys. We have 10s across the board as we record Friday morning. There is a 9.5 minus 115 at FanDuel, so we could be moving in that direction. Trenches mismatch here for me. Big trenches mismatch here for me. I think sometimes we talk overreactions in week 2 from week 1. I agree with you guys. This is too many points on the move to me. And the Rams, okay, they got stopped by a defense with a consensus top 3 front 7 and a top 3 secondary. And now we're getting 3 extra points against the consensus bottom 5 Falcons front 7 and bottom 5 Falcons secondary. And Atlanta in week 1 was bottom 20 in pass rush win rate. So if you had concerns about the Rams offensive line, Atlanta really doesn't have much to take advantage of it. And if the Falcons are going to blitz like they did last week, they blitzed on 33% of dropbacks. Well, Stafford was 68% completion percentage against the blitz last year, which was top 5 in the NFL. So, yeah, that's a buy point for me if we get to 9.5, and I'm still considering a half unit at 10. Yeah,
and if you're in a non-Circa survivor pool, I don't hate the Rams either as your play this week. You got to hold on to them if you're in Circa, but if you're in a non-Circa one, I think that's a pretty solid survivor play as well. Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos. We don't have to recap what we saw with the Denver Broncos. One of the worst coaching debuts maybe ever for Nathaniel Hackett. Just blew it in every single way humanly possible. That said, they are 10-point favorites over the Texans back at home this week in Denver. 45.5 to 46 is your total. Steven, again, I go back to what I said. They get it to the 1 yard line twice, can't get it in. They get to the 3 yard line, have to settle for a field goal. Like the red zone offense was completely atrocious. The sequencing in play calling was really weird at times. Not targeting a wide receiver for 22 minutes in the game to start off. Just very odd for Nathaniel Hackett. I'm going to give him a pass. It's his first game that he's ever coached in the NFL. But you got to start getting your stuff correct here. You're 10-point favorites at home. I need to see it first before I would be able to lay any sort of number anywhere close to this with this Broncos squad. Do I think they're far superior to the Texans? Yes, but I can't get there. If anything, it'd be like an overlook for me because I think there'd be a correction on the Broncos side of things where they probably should have scored 30 something last week where, can they put up close to that this week against the Texans, and you're only asking the Texans to score you 14, 17 garbage time points or something like that. Like, if anything, an overlook for me, but nothing in the account in this one.
On our team preview, I said that I thought the Broncos would be a big over team this year, and this week I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I bet over 45. I'd be fine at 45.5 here. Mm-hmm. To all your points, 6.8 yards per play week 1, very solid, just brutal red zone luck. 0 for 4 in the red zone, the 2 goal line fumbles. And I think this defense was overrated coming into the year. They no longer have Vic Fangio. And I thought they were pretty fortunate to be top 5 in points allowed last year, considering they're 20th in yards allowed per drive and also 20th in defensive DVOA. So they allowed Geno Smith to throw 7 yards per attempt last week. So that's not a great start for them. And on the other side of the ball, I think the other thing that helps the over here is something interesting happened with the Texans and Pep Hamilton and David Mills last week. They were number 4 in situation neutral pace.
They were running like plays left and right, dude. It was crazy.
And they were also number 4 when leading by 7+ points. That's what's interesting to me. They held the lead for most of that game, and they still were operating their offense at a very high pace. That's compared to 23rd in the league last year in situation neutral. So I think everything kind of lines up here for an over.
Adam, Broncos, 10-point favorites at home, 45.5 is your total.
I mean, if you want me to go deeper into it, I can, but I don't want anything to do with this game.
That's perfectly fine. I love it. Listen, hey, like we said, we're not going to waste people's time when we don't have to. Arizona Cardinals and the Las Vegas Raiders. This one's fairly interesting. This had gotten as high as 6 in favor of the Raiders. We started to see buyback and get to 5.5. Now we're to 5. Now, again, these are not significant numbers and key numbers, but it does just mean money was coming back in the other direction on the Cardinals to get it off of that 6, which has actually become the third most key number now with the extra point thing. So we're going 3, 7, 6, and 6 actually not trailing 7 by all that much here as of late. So does come off of that, sitting 5.5 right now in favor of the Raiders. Adam, I don't know if we saw a ton from this Raiders team last week. I mean, it was a very weird deal where Carr had 3 turnovers where he usually protects the ball pretty well. So it's kind of like an aberration as opposed to the norm situation. And then the Cardinals just, again, they're absolutely horrible right now with all their injuries, with the suspension of DeAndre Hopkins. Like, I don't know really what to do with this one. So it's a sit back and watch for me. I just can't find a way to get there on either side.
I'll take Arizona in the points, and I think you have a clearly better quarterback getting points in this game. Kyler Murray doesn't have a lot of weapons, and we just heard this morning for certain that Rondale Moore is going to be out for this game. So obviously he's way down on weapons, but you know what else is down? The Raiders defense. Last week, we heard that this defense was going to get by on its pass rush, right? Chandler Jones and Max Crosby did not get home. They didn't even get pressures. Like, Max Crosby was okay. Chandler Jones was not. And so if they can't get to Kyler Murray and Kyler Murray has time to make things happen, I have grave concerns for this Raiders defense. Now, on the other side of the ball, you mentioned Derek Carr taking care of the ball fairly well. I would go back to what Joey Bosa said last year after the Chargers played the Raiders, where he said, we knew that if we could hit him a couple of times, he would start to rattle. So I would suggest that if you're thinking about playing the Raiders, go read some of the comments from offensive coordinator Mick Lombardi. They were asking him, were the beat writers this week, what do you think about how Derek Carr played, how the offensive line played? And I think Mick Lombardi gave you a little bit of information that you need. He used the word footwork more than once with Derek Carr. Once he starts to feel pressure, he doesn't step into throws. And one of those interceptions was a flat-footed interception that he just stood there and threw right into the hands of the Chargers defense. So I overall feel a lot more confident in Arizona bouncing back here than I do in the Las Vegas Raiders' ability to, keep any sort of momentum that they had last week going.
And listen, I think those are very good points you brought up about Carr and pressure, because here's the thing. The Cardinals blitzed Mahomes last week, 51% of his dropbacks, right? But the problem is Mahomes eats up the blitz. He loves whenever you blitz him. And so it worked to their detriment vastly, right? But Steven, if they employ that same defensive strategy this week against Derek Carr, things would get a little bit more interesting, because Carr is certainly not the guy against the blitz that Mahomes is. And so maybe we see all of those Cardinals blitzes actually come to fruition, as opposed to being a big detriment to the team.
Adam's not alone. If you go listen to the Gridiron Gamble podcast on our YouTube channel, then you'll also hear Mo Nawara and Brett Colson also like Arizona to cover this week. So I'll let you guys listen to them. I don't have a big lean here. It's my final prop of the year, so I suck at props. So if you want to fade it, please, by all means, go ahead. Devontae Adams over 7.5 receptions, 17 targets last week, hyper targeted. Could be a high-scoring game here, and a little narrative street for you. His grandparents have never seen him play a game in person in his life. This week will be the first time. So Devontae is going to go out there and do it for grandmom and pop-pop.
Right, Adam? That's a good one,
man. I suck at props. No. This is what I'm down to. I suck so bad at props. I'm going with the pop narrative.
Hey, I played the Adams over 6.5 last week, and I think if you want to charge this one to Peepaw and Meemaw, you go right ahead and do it, because Devontae Adams will see the football. To put a cap on this thing, guys, the preseason look, the Superbook numbers from May had the Raiders laying 2. If you can make me a case for why the Raiders would add 3.5 to 4 points, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Cincinnati Bengals and the Dallas Cowboys right now. Cincinnati 7.5 point road favorites over the Cowboys. 41.5 to 42 is your total here. Guys, we know the situation. No Dak Prescott for the Cowboys for a while. Not getting back any of those receivers either, at least for this week. So we're going out there with CeeDee Lamb and Noah Brown and all these guys like that, Jalen Tolbert and whatever, all this stuff. So it's going to be an interesting game. No matter what here for this Cowboy squad. Look, this was the most obvious teaser leg of the week for me. It is in every single leg. Like I have Bengals Saints, Bengals Steelers, Bengals Niners. Like Bengals is the anchor for me this week. They're going to win this game by at least a point. Look, if you look back to Cincinnati last week, it's the same deal we're kind of talking about with the Rams. Burrow didn't get as much work in preseason as you'd have liked, because he had the appendectomy surgery. The same deal that Stafford had, the elbow thing, that he didn't get as much work as you would have liked. The starters didn't play in preseason, so it was kind of their first action out there and all that. And even still, they had multiple opportunities to win the game. It's just the long snapper and the kicker couldn't get it done for this team. So look, this seems like a boat race type situation to me. I think the Cowboys defense is bad as well. I think Burrow throws for 300 plus in this thing. I think Jamar Chase goes absolutely nuts. This might be a sneaky over, even with the Cowboys being so terrible. But Adam, if you look at it, it's like, what if Cincinnati puts up 35 on their own? And I think that's very well within the range of outcomes here. Like I think them putting 5 touchdowns on the board is very, very within the range of outcomes against this Cowboys team that I expect to have very little success, maybe some turnovers, maybe some short fields for Joe Burrow and company. So love them in a teaser leg. I could not love it anymore. And then again, I think it's a sneaky over type deal, because I think Cincinnati gets you majority of the way there, and you're not asking Dallas for very much to help out.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me pouring one out right now. And I'm not pouring one out for Dak Prescott. I'm pouring one out for me, because Dak Prescott getting hurt blew up my ability to bet against the Cowboys for at least 3 or 4 weeks before everyone figured out that they're frauds. I told you last week that the Cowboys were the most overrated team in the NFL, and they showed you on the field very quickly that they suck. And this team is not going to be any good even with Dak Prescott. So the Dallas Cowboys are still an obvious fade in the spot that you're talking about here, Matt, with the teaser leg. I know Steven's going to be here as well because I know he talked about having some teasers from last week tied up to Cincinnati when they were getting points. And I think that was clearly a mistake that Cincinnati was getting points in the first place. So I'll leave it right there. The Cowboys were going to suck without Dak Prescott. They're going to suck more with Cooper Rush. And I'm just mad that I don't get the opportunity to fade them when the market still has some belief.
All right, Adam. So you mentioned it. I got 2.5 on the spread. I got 8.5 on the teaser leg. I feel like I'm sitting with 11 and the dealer's showing a 6. Am I doubling down here on the current teaser leg?
Need.
No, you've got everything you need.
You got the best of everything. Yes, you got the no need.
There we go. Good lesson for everybody. There we go.
Yeah, dude, good on you for having the foresight for that. Good on you. I'm jealous of that number, but dude, this could be a full-on beat down. And so we got to look at it and call a spade a spade. Like Cincinnati's going to get right in this game. They're going to get right in a big way. Burrow over 300 yards.
Do you guys still want to see what this offensive line does after they got wrecked last week, though? Because that is the one thing just moving. I think they're going to win the game. I don't have any concerns. But moving forward, I want to see better win rates from this offensive line against Dallas.
Yeah, they need to gel. They always talk about with offensive lines, right? Like they play as a cohesive unit, and like it's right out of the gate, it's just going to be a little tough. They'll be fine.
The one thing I would say is I think you look at Dallas, and you're going to start doubling Micah Parsons, and that's going to be it. Right. I know it's hard to do because he doesn't come every snap, but they're going to know where Micah Parsons is every snap. And it's a lot different than defending TJ Watt and Cam Hayward.
Guys, we have full breakdowns of the Sunday night game and both Monday night games coming to you on Sunday mornings and Monday mornings here on the YouTube channel. So be sure, come back. We'll get you the latest info on those games as well. It is a very interesting week too. Hopefully you're still in your survivor pool. Hopefully you had a good week in your contest that you played. And hopefully, of course, you had a good week just on your normal betting card. Everything we do absolutely free, so please go in, subscribe, rate, review. We really do appreciate all of that from you guys, and let us know in the comment section if you agree, disagree, whatever it might be. We're here. Free contests each and every week over at thelines.com, so be sure head over there, get in. Free money, gift cards, swag, all the different stuff like that. We want you guys to feel a part of the community. For Adam, for Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck in week 2.